US President Barack Obama has announced plans to increase economic stimulus spending over the next 3 months. President Obama says the spending boost aims to save or create more than 500,000 jobs.
For more on the fortunes of the US economy, we're joined now by Professor Peter Gourevitch, who's a political science expert based at the University of California. Professor Gourevitch is in Australia to speak at this week's US Studies Centre National Summit, and he joins us now from Sydney. Professor Gourevitch, good morning.
Good morning.
How would you characterise the first 100 days of stimulus spending by the US government?
Well, active. I think it's a good idea. I think the market has stabilized. You know, the stock market was at 14,000 about a year and a half ago. It dropped to 6,700 in February, and now it's back up to about 8,700. So I think the markets are stabilizing, and I think the stimulus package is part of that.
The US government's going to ramp up its stimulus spending now, but the White House has come in for some criticism for setting quite a sluggish pace with its stimulus spending. What's been the hold-up?
Well, it's hard to figure out how to spend things. There's this idea of shovel-ready. They're not doing things I'd like them to do, which is to build projects on public work projects the way they did in the Depression of the 30s, like the Great Bridge here in Sydney. But they say they're not shovel-ready. So actually getting the money into the hands of people who can spend it is not an easy thing to do.
So what will this ramp-up involve? How much money is actually going to be splashed now through the US economy?
Oh, $500 billion or something like that, a number a little larger. The other thing that's happening that is harder to explain is that the Fed is loosening up the money supply. It's essentially creating, that's the Federal Reserve Bank, it's creating money that's allowing banks to spend or to make loans, and that is a very important source of stimulus that doesn't appear in the stimulus budget figures.
And how's this level of spending being received by voters in the US?
Well, I think that people are anxious and worried. There's a lot of anxiety. The Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke said the other day that he was worried about the long-run inflationary impact. Is the level too high? I think people are worried about that. Everybody from any political persuasion, nobody wants to run up an enormous deficit, but the debate is over. Do you think it's necessary? The counterfactual is what would happen to the economy if you didn't do that. The people who support it say that the loss of production would be worse than the amount of money that you're spending on it. That's a very hard thing to prove in any clear way, but there's a lot of anxiety about the future and a lot of anxiety about the rising debt and what that will do to interest rates.
Now, 600,000 jobs is a pretty lofty goal. How's the President proposing that will happen over the next 100 days?
Well, I don't know how he's going to do that in 100 days, to tell you the truth. I think he's hoping that the revival of the economy will make people spend more. Businesses will see that there's more money flowing in and that they will start to hire. I think that's the hope. That's the idea of a stimulus idea, is that you get people spending again and businesses will therefore start hiring.
President Obama has indicated that it will take a considerable amount of time to pull the country out of such a deep recession. Is there any time frame that's being bandied about?
People talk about the beginning of next year. So what are we now? We're in 2009. So sometime in 10 I'd say that's the optimistic hope, is that starting at the end of this year, the beginning of next year, the figures will start to improve. But that's optimistic.
Professor Peter Gourevitch in Sydney, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.